Hello, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just one more moment. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very timely topic. We are so excited to be talking to you about this more. We're going to start just another moment. I'm seeing people still filter in, and so we're going to give everyone just another moment to get settled. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to get started in just one more moment. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started now. Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Allison Weiss, and I'm the Associate Director of Corporate and Executive Education at the Brown School of Professional Studies. The mission of the Brown School of Professional Studies is to equip you with the resources, skills, tools, and network that you need to change the way the world works for good. As we all know, we spend almost 50% of our lives at work. And so having the confidence and the competence to lead inclusively and productively can mean a huge difference in terms of results and in terms of how included and fully present you and your team feel at work. So you have a huge ability to both do well and to do good. And we're here to support you every step of the way through a portfolio of short courses, certificates, and master's degrees that are on in-demand topics and that fit into your busy working schedule. Today, we are really excited to offer this free masterclass on building a culture of AI literacy. In preparation for this masterclass, I looked up just a few stats, and even I was staggered by this, and this is something I've been looking at quite a bit. 64% of businesses expect AI to increase their productivity. However, 75% of consumers are concerned about misinformation from AI. In addition, AI is expected to see an annual growth of 37.3% from 2023 to 2030. So what this shows is that AI is inevitable. This is not, is this a tool I should adopt? Is it not? This is coming to every industry, every field, every level, but there's still a lot of distrust, misinformation, and miscommunication around it. And so learning how to adopt AI in an effective, ethical, and risk mitigating way is a leadership competency that every single one of us is going to need to have. And that's why I'm so excited to have an expert with us today to help lead us through how to build that leadership competency. And if you're as excited about this topic as I am, we are considering launching an entire course on this topic, and I will be launching some polls towards the end of today's program to gauge what your interest would be if we were to launch this, and your feedback will make a huge difference in shaping that possible program. My last PSA before I turn things over to the main event is that if you have a question, please submit your question throughout. Please don't wait until the end. I expect to get a lot of questions, and this will help us get through as many questions as possible. If you have a question, please click on the bottom bar of your Zoom, click on the Q&A button, and type and submit your question there. And I will keep an eye on it throughout today's presentation, and we'll get to as many of your questions as possible. So with that, I am so pleased to introduce Taiwo Togun. Taiwo is a co-founder of InclusionBridge and the founder of SecHub Analytics. So he is an entrepreneur who knows what it looks like to put AI into practice at work. It's not just theory for him. In addition, he's a visiting scientist at Brown University. He is a seasoned data scientist, social entrepreneur, and educator. And I can think of no one better to lead us through this confusing but incredibly important topic of how to build AI literacy in organizations. Thank you so much for being here, Taiwo, and I turn things over to you.
Thank you, Allison, and thank you everyone for joining this conversation. I am very honored to be here. So I want to begin with this experiment, since large language model is now the order of the day. It's the buzzword. Everybody is using it as, you know, very well and sometimes not so well, right? Because there's some people who use large language models as a search engine. That's one of the things it's not designed to do. It's not designed to give you the truth. So when I thought about this topic, I thought, what a way of sort of combining and killing two birds with the same stone. So this is ChatGPT using the GPT-4 engine. And here is a prompt. Typically, one of the advantages of large language model is they are pre-trained. And so they have some context that are inbuilt with them. And with the right prompting, you can get reasonable results for your question. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask ChatGPT to help me refine my prompt so that it is more effective. And so what I'm giving it is, this is my persona. So I'm telling it that you're an educator and a data scientist. You're also a visiting scientist at the Race, Identity, and Social Environments Lab at Brown, studying algorithmic fairness. You've been invited to present a master class on building a culture of AI literacy to business leaders. How would you define literacy? So the two tasks here, first is help me refine my prompt. And then once it refines my prompt, maybe I will be able to get a reasonable answer. And so while ChatGPT is doing its thing, in the work I do at the RISE Lab, we define algorithmic literacy or AI literacy as the ability to understand and to critically evaluate the roles, capabilities, and limitations, as well as implications of AI and in various contexts. So pause on my ranting and see what GPT gave us. Okay. As a distinguished, I'm going to copy this. Okay, so it went all in. Let's see what it comes up with. Wrong prompt. So and this is a risk I thought is worth taking, because at least I show prompt engineering. If the output is not, if it doesn't work, I have notes that I've created. So let's see, could you propose strategies or initiatives? Okay. Forgive me. One last trial. Okay, there we go. This is the prompt. Okay, well, this is not cooperating, and this is part of the risk of ChatGPT. So we will abandon the experiment, and luckily, Okay. So luckily, we have a definition of what AI literacy is. And one of the things that in my experiment with ChatGPT, one of the things that I thought was very cool was when it elaborated on the different aspects of algorithmic literacy. When it elaborated, one of the striking things was just a note, a very important note, that technical proficiency, right, is only one aspect of algorithmic literacy. And I say this emphatically just to, as a charge to business leaders out there, that you can't outsource you can outsource AI literacy to your technology or IT team, right? There are so many aspects of it, from technical proficiency, critical analysis and ethical engagement, social cultural awareness. All these are all aspects of AI literacy. Simply put, you have to understand the roles, capabilities, limitations, and implications of AI in various contexts and beyond just the technical terms. So, one, you can't outsource your AI literacy to your technology team. Next is then some of the key takeaways, because we can't possibly touch on all of this in 30 minutes. But some key takeaways that I thought will be important in sharing is, in order to start your journey of building a culture of AI literacy in your organization, that it's very important to identify context-specific capabilities and limitations. And I qualify capabilities and limitations with context-specific simply because it matters, and I will tell you why. Okay, another takeaway that's important is systematically mitigate bias, right? This is saying that using the systems that are already in place in your organization, there are ways you can leverage them to mitigate bias. Cultivate a culture of innovation, craft nimble, adaptable, and ethical AI policies, and keep up with AI developments. And what do I mean by context-specific capabilities and limitations of AI? Right, so every time every time you use AI for a purpose, there are different AIs, or the different algorithms that are defined for different purposes. And one of the key things is keeping up with the current technologies and trends on what those types of AI that you need, what algorithms do you need for your own purpose, right? Engaging key stakeholders is very key in our ability to identify context-specific capabilities and limitations. Also building a diverse team and engaging end users. And I think one of the common frustrations, or one of the common examples of context-specific limitations of AI is the chatbot, right? The customer service chatbot. I don't know how many times you have experienced the frustration of, you want to speak to a representative, but it is not hearing that, right? And so that can lead to some frustration. And I think that's one of the key takeaways here, is that forgive me, I'm missing my notes here. Yeah, the note I missed that I wanted to make sure I pass across is this instruction. Please drop examples of solutions that you've experienced with context-specific capabilities or limitations in the chat. Okay. So another takeaway that I think is very important is that you already have systems in place to mitigate bias, and you should use them. I say that simply because this idea that bias is unique to AI, or because of AI is why we have bias, is false. Bias has existed in every wave of technology, right? From photography, where Shirley was the calibration of colored pixels. We had socioeconomic bias in the days of internet access, where only a only a couple of people of socioeconomic status could afford the internet, and that led to a digital divide. We also have gender bias in something as in medical research, especially those that involve cardiology. So bias has existed before now, which means that if you're in an organization, you sort of have encountered this, or at least there are systems in place to mitigate these biases. But I want to talk about this quote from Dr. Edmond Gordon. Dr. Edmond Gordon is a 102-year-old psychologist who does a lot of work in biased systems. And this quote is from 1990, and I think the key here is that context dependence of algorithms was recognized a long time ago, right? And those who develop algorithms tend to make their own community the center of their universe and the conceptual framework that constrains all thought. Now, I think this just emphasizes that AI solutions are typically context dependent. Again, certain AI are useful for certain tasks, and we need to educate ourselves on what those are. At least our organizations need to be educated on what those are. But in addition, of this, because of this existing inherent bias based on context, based on the fact that the authors of algorithm have a perspective, a worldview that may be different from others. It means that we need to pay attention to different sources of bias so that we can mitigate them effectively. And building and empowering a diverse and cross-functional team is one practical way of starting to address or check the bias that exists in our organizational culture. Also, rigorous testing. When we build products, it's advisable that we test it rigorously. In fact, it makes sense to think about experimenting with internal facing products so that you get enough feedback before you run the risk of I guess, how do we call it, unintended consequences, right? So rigorous testing of the things, rigorous testings of algorithms that you are experimenting with, or products or solutions that you build with algorithms. Also, regular assessments and feedback mechanisms to ensure that you are mitigating the bias. And lastly, this is not a finite or exhaustive list, but measuring perception of bias is another important thing that and actionable that we can do in using existing systems to mitigate bias. And this is the work we do at the RISE Lab, where we try to capture people's perception of fairness. And that is a very difficult task, because there are, at least as of 2021, at least 20 or 21 measures of fairness. And when you optimize for one measure or one metric of fairness, then you break the others, or the others don't necessarily measure up to, they're not equal across groups that you're comparing the performances on. So, but there are tools to do this. And so if you are interested in learning more about such tools, I can, well, you will have my email, and also connect you to Dr. Boykin of the RISE Lab, the Race, Identity, and Social Environment Labs at Brown University. Okay. Another takeaway is cultivating a culture of innovation. And I think that this is very important, because I think it is, without an innovation culture, whether you're literate in AI or not, you cannot effectively leverage AI, right? And so I think it's important that we are building a culture of innovation. But I want to pause here and just throw it out to the audience, just out of curiosity. Do you have a culture of innovation in your organizations?
So the question Taiwo asked, we just launched a poll for you to answer it. So if you would take a look and answer the question, does your organization have a culture of innovation? And I'm going to leave it open for just 5 more seconds. So please get your answer in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, you can see the results now. 74% of our participants said yes, and 26% of our participants said no.
That's awesome. For those of us who have a culture of innovation, it will be really interesting to hear how it's working for you. But this is not a forum for that, but I would love to hear what you're doing, because I have some lessons I want to share from my day job, right? Because my day job, in addition to the nonprofit that I run at InclusionBridge, is teaching. I teach computer science to very young and brilliant minds, and in our school, what you're looking at is a program that we have adopted because we think it's a program that fosters innovation. This program is Project Invent. It's also an organization that is devoted to helping teachers, giving teachers the tools to cultivate these necessary practices so that they can help students develop these mindsets, which are the mindsets of an innovator. So in the school where I teach, I think I would say that we have a culture of innovation, because many of our teachers have been encouraged to adopt these practices so that they help students cultivate these mindsets. And so as executives and business leaders, I encourage you, I hesitate to say make failure okay, but I think make iteration an expectation, right? If failure is not okay, but the expectation that you can iterate and improve, make that okay. Remove bureaucracies that's going to prevent your teams from pushing to the next level. Adopt a co-learner mindset. And I think all of these are ingredients. Even though we use them for our students, I think we can draw a parallel on how we as business leaders can use it to help our team cultivate the necessary mindset of innovation. Then I think Another takeaway that is important is crafting nimble, adaptable, and ethical AI policies. And these are policies that allow you to balance experimentation with managing risks, right? Sure, you want it you want to encourage a lot of experimentation, but you also want to have you don't want to stifle innovation, but you also want to be wary of experimentation that have very little business value or organization value of learning. And what happens when you're too lenient and when there are no policies that sort of describe the kinds of experiments you are allowed to engage in, or the kinds of so large language models now is so accessible, everybody can easily build something, and they can build it on their own laptops, and it works. It works for them. But thinking about, if you have disconnected processes, if everybody is building different things that are useful to individual members of the team and could be useful collectively, if it is fragmented, right, then you run the risk of increasing the total cost of ownership, and also the risk of exposing or being exposed to reputational risk. Also important that as you're thinking about your AI, the organization's AI policy, and I'm sure executives are scared about this because it's real. The reputational risk is real. The impact you make beyond just your operations is real. So the fact that AI or algorithms you build have they can lead to unintended consequences. It means that you want a policy that thinks about those unintended consequences. I think that, something as simple as defining the type of large language model that is allowed is a policy that can easily make sure that your team is all aligned on whether this LLM allows you to use flags that can prevent your prompts and your data from being used to retrain, or whether you don't care. But if you just to avoid the risk of unintended consequences, I think putting guardrails in AI policy to manage risk and mitigate bias is extremely important. So some of my classmates who are in the audience when I was at Brown will probably remember the story of Agent Kathy. This is the story, I would say it is a story where AI literacy, or the absence of AI literacy, led to a failed project where we built a fantastic, or at least what we think was a phenomenal technology, but it never got used. So what is this story? In the era of COVID, teachers were overwhelmed with paperwork, and a school reached out to us and paid us to develop a solution that was going to help manage the wasted the wasted time on report writing and report synthesis, and just focus and help teachers focus more on what they love to do, which is work with students. And so there was a clear business value, there was a clear business need for the product that we were contracted to build. And everybody at the school, because we polled them, we did a survey, everybody wanted this as soon as yesterday. And here it is, it was built. But despite multiple efforts to accommodate the users in the deployment, there was always something. Either let's change the rollout schedule. Let's think about, this process that we have. How is it affected? So there were fixed processes that we didn't think, well, so we were also at fault, right? We were so excited about building this shiny object, and then the shiny object that seemed to have a business value, but the culture of the organization we were building it for was not ready. And similarly, they didn't have, and at the same time, they also didn't have, the policy. So it was a very difficult sell, right? We got paid and we got a pat on the back and got good job. But I share this simply because if innovation in your organization looks like a small group of people that are just experimenting and, they show you the shiny toy they've built and they get a pat on the back, good job, without a plan to roll it in to your, without a plan to test it out in-house and adopt it, then it will go nowhere and it is pointless, right? And so this was a case where the friction of adoption was much greater than the perceived value of what we built. And I think the cause of that is when an organization does not have, when an organization has limited AI literacy and no AI policy to ensure that their processes can fit or that whatever solution is built fits into the process. Okay, so that's the lessons from Agent Kathy. And last but not least is the idea of keeping up with AI, with developments in AI. And so the culture of continuous learning is important. So if you have an innovation function in your organization, you can leverage that to sort of create to curate, not create, to curate relevant, to create relevant developments that that pertain to your business. You can have regular hackathons just to motivate this, motivate solutions with business value and low cost. So you can easily turn things around, things that will allow a lot of experimentation. But how you do this is figuring out what is out there, right? Curating news that aligns with your business and keeping up with the developments. And it's very important to stay on top of things, especially because of the way because of how rapid things are evolving. And it also helps so that you can easily update your AI policies. And so building a culture of literacy at your organization entails many things. And the takeaway for this short conversation are the following: identifying your context-specific capabilities and limitations of AI, systematically mitigating bias, cultivating a culture of innovation, crafting nimble, adaptable, and ethical AI policies, and keeping up with the developments in AI. And I want to keep this, I guess it can be longer than this because I also want to have a conversation. I think the value of this forum is to hear your questions and think together about, how to answer them, and maybe we all co-learning, right? We all co-learn and benefit from this conversation. So on that note, thank you, and I will take questions.
Thank you so much, Taiwo. This was so great. I think this is an area where the change is happening so rapidly that it can be really difficult to distill the confusing information and advice out there into a tangible roadmap and action steps. And I think you've done a really nice job of breaking down the 5 most important steps everyone should take today to infuse a culture of AI literacy throughout their organization. So thank you. I think this is really valuable. So we do have some questions, and we're going to get to your questions, but first we have a few questions for you. So I am going to open up the next poll in just one moment. Okay, I've launched the poll, and this is for all of you to help us shape the future of the offerings at the School of Professional Studies. As I mentioned at the beginning, our mission is to help you change the way the world works for good. And so we are looking to bring you in-demand topics in a format that is going to work for you. And so I have a 3-question poll that is up right now. Thank you to those of you who've already taken it, and I'd love to have a great response rate from this group. The first question is, would you be interested in taking a short course, which would be about 6 weeks long, on this topic? So this topic being artificial intelligence for leaders. The second question is, which of these topics are most important to you? And you can check all that apply. One is a technological perspective of AI. So if you want us to get into the back end, talk about coding and the technology of AI. One is optimizing AI as a leader. So a little bit more along the lines of what you heard today, like how do I get my workforce to utilize it well? How do I plan to utilize it well? One is on mitigating risks. And one is on diversity, equity, inclusion / ethics / bias of AI. And you can choose multiple options for that one. And then number 3 is, what format would you prefer to take this class in? And your 2 options are synchronous, which means live. So it would be something like every Tuesday at 5 o'clock, we would have a session. Or number 2 is mostly self-paced with a few synchronous sessions. So we would never just have a fully self-paced course because we want to make sure you have that classroom experience. We could go in either direction of either a fully synchronous class or a mostly asynchronous with a few opportunities to check in and learn from one another. So thank you for those of you who've already submitted your answers. I'm going to close the poll in about 10 seconds. So if you have not yet submitted, please do that in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Thank you. And so just for, in case you're interested here, I'll share the results briefly. Most of you would be interested in a course on this topic. You're pretty split on which of the topics are most important to you, with DEI being number 1 and optimizing AI as a leader being number 2, but everything being 60% or above. And you are pretty clear that you'd like it to be mostly self-paced with a few synchronous sessions. Thank you. That's super helpful. And you're helping to shape the future of our portfolio. So I'm really appreciative. So now I'm going to move over to the questions. If you do have a question that you have not yet submitted, please do. You can click on the bottom bar of Zoom and then click on Q&A and submit your question there. And so the first question for you, Taiwo, is, do you have any examples you can share of using AI in medical education? And I know that's not your field, so you may not.
In medical education, I have seen applications that help. I've seen applications that help doctors synthesize their medical notes. That will be an application. Well, that's not in medical education. That's just in medicine. In medical education, certainly in taking a lot of research papers and easily summarizing it. I think there are generic applications in summarizing that are very applicable. I think that medical education, yeah, I think applications for effective studying, certainly. I think applications for note taking. Yeah, those are two things that I can think of in medical education. In medicine, there are a lot of applications of AI in medicine. Um, and also, I want to also encourage everybody who has more knowledge of medical education and application of AI to probably drop in the chat some of the things that they have encountered or seen.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And the last thing I would add to that is that we do have a healthcare specific program called the Digital Health Innovation Certificate. And so if you are interested specifically in healthcare, and we define healthcare broadly, so medical education would definitely fall into that category, or if you are an engineer or a STEM professional who wants to develop healthcare products, that is another resource for you. That course is a 6-month course. It's a longer program than the one we're exploring creating together here. And it looks at how you can go from an idea to a completed innovation in 6 months to help to innovate and improve healthcare outcomes. So that would be another resource for you. And I love the call to action, Taiwo, of having other people who might have more information share it in the chat. That's a great idea. The next question for you is, can you speak about tools we can use to identify and mitigate bias in our AI?
Yes. What are some tools we can use? So at the RISE Lab, one of the, like I said, one of the tools we are building sort of captures how people perceive fairness, right? And so such a tool, using that to poll people's perception of different fairness metrics or definition, is one thing that immediately comes to mind. There are also, let's see. I think if you understand, so I think the key is evaluation, because if you understand the context of how the system might be used, right, then robustly investigating how well, then you can robustly think of how you can investigate how well it performs. I can do some research to get some more specific tools. But I think a second point as important is that when you create a tool, right, when people use your tool, I think it is important to sort of keep track of when the tools are used. It is important to think about how the outputs are generated and the user outcomes that are associated with them. And I think with all of that in place, you can look back and see if the performance is what you expected, right? But there are specific tools that have been designed. None comes to mind right now, except for the Boykin Lab tool that we've been working on for a while now. Yeah.
Thank you. That's a great resource. And, obviously this anonymous question asker didn't give us a lot of context about what they are looking for tools for. So if you are still here and you could give us some additional information, I think that would probably help a lot. But one thing I can add is, if you are thinking about mitigating bias in like the hiring process, for example, there are a robust set of tools that help with that. there is one platform, and now I don't remember the name of it, but if you Google it, it comes up really quickly. It's an AI tool that will read your job description, and it will predict based off of the keywords in your job description what demographics will apply. And specifically, this one's for gender. So they found that there's a very strong correlation between the way that you write a job description and how many women apply for jobs. There's not as strong of a correlation for men. Men will tend to apply for any job, but women will tend to only apply for jobs that they feel more invited to apply to. So that's one example of something that could help mitigate bias, is by helping to make sure that the job description is open and welcoming. And then I think to Taiwo's earlier point on his slide, I think making sure you have a diverse team at every stage of the process. So whether that's designing your product or your process or your program, depending on what your output is, or on the hiring committee or the promotions committee, whatever it is in the decision-making table, I think that will make a really big difference. I remember a story that I heard once that has always stuck with me, is that when the YouTube app was first released onto iPhones, they got complaints from about 20% of their users that it was broken. And everyone's mind was blown. This is Google, this is not a startup. This is a multi-million-dollar organization that knows how to release products very well. And no one could figure out what's going wrong. All the testers were looking at their phones and they were like, nothing's wrong with it. And they discovered that it was because if you're left-handed, you hold the phone the other way than if you hold it if you're right-handed, and they didn't have a single left-handed person on the testing team. And that is why they were getting complaints from such a specific but small subpopulation saying that it was broken. And that has stuck with me because it's such a tangible, specific example, but you can extrapolate that for all sorts of different identities and all sorts of products, processes, systems, programs, et cetera. So I think that that's another tool you can use, is just making sure your people resources are allocated correctly.
I should also add that, it's mitigating risk is always important, right? So as an organization, from that perspective, as an organization, thinking about predictive systems in low risk scenarios, right? I think that helps in mitigating risk and sort of working to reduce uncertainty in how you evaluate over time. I think all of this would allow you to eventually be able to make bigger bets that you're confident in, right? And so just sharing that this is, yeah, I don't also want to take credit for this, because I remember having this conversation with one of my co-founders, Matthew Huggins, who does innovation management and quantification, right? And I remember specifically his words around small bets, small bets before the big bets. And I think that's very important in mitigating risk.
That's great advice. Thank you. Our next question is that there was a Washington Times article a couple of weeks ago that mentioned that there are digital sweatshops where people are working on AI technology under bad conditions. Is there any way that those of us who have purchasing power can make sure that offshore labor isn't being exploited to support our AI ambitions? Are there ideas or safeguards we can build in?
It's a very good question. Safeguards against digital sweatshops. Yeah, forgetting my thoughts about this. No, I wonder, Alison, do you have some thoughts around this? Around digital sweatshops, how do we safeguard against them?
Yeah, I unfortunately don't have a good answer. I wish I did. It's a great question. Thank you for asking it. The closest thing to an answer I can give you, and this is not foolproof, is that there is a category of corporations called B Corp, just the letter B, and then corporations. those corporations are companies that have had to register as social good companies. But I say it's not foolproof because that hasn't been strictly defined, like what it means to be a social good company. It hasn't really been strictly defined. It's not a regulated term. And there isn't really like a very strong governing body. There is something, there's like a certification process you have to go through to get it. So it's not nothing, but it's not foolproof either. And so I would say that that would be at least an easy first step you could take, is to try to work with a B corporation rather than, a corporation that doesn't have that designation. And I think that will help you, that helps your odds basically, but it doesn't guarantee it.
But even if a company doesn't have the designation, I think you can ask questions, right? And then make your decision because it's a valid question. Are you supporting sweatshops? And if you are, I don't want to be your customer. But that's a very good question. One that I haven't thought much about, but thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you. And I think it's probably a developing topic too as this field grows. The next question is, what types of job functions and roles have you seen are some of the most in demand in the AI arena? And I also would add, which ones do you think will be most affected by AI, which are kind of like the other side of that same coin?
Yeah, I feel the most exposed jobs to AI are jobs that involve, especially in the days of large language model, I think jobs that involve text generation and summarizations, right? I think we can expect a high level of exposure. I think that the nature of in the era of AI, I think we thinking about how it fits in different industries is first, right? Because you can apply AI in most industries, and then the role you apply it to will be dependent on the nature of the job. So I would say that, well, one thing that is very recent before in the advent of large language models is becoming a prompt engineer. You earn ridiculous amount, like 195K to become a prompt engineer. So that's one emerging new job. I think that also sort of one of the things that's becoming very important and very clear is that because of the bias, because of unintended consequences that are possible with the outputs of AI model is sort of having the role of somebody who checks the output, right? So the human in the loop functionality of ensuring the integrity of the output of AI models. So jobs that are exposed and jobs that are created as a result of AI, I can imagine a lot of them. I think well, I guess that's also a human in the loop generalizes if I'm using a chat bot and I just want to make sure that the output is I want to make sure that the output is relevant. I think I will have a human in the loop in there too. Yeah, if I just do this and just do a quick search, I'm sure I can tell you a lot, a lot more. But there are several jobs that are exposed and that have been created as a result of AI. And
yeah, it seems like really the real answer to this question is absolutely every job is going to be exposed to and affected by AI. I think one metaphor I saw that is feeling very resonant with me is that we're all going to become supervisors of AI. And so kind of regardless of your field or your role, we're going to start thinking about AI as almost like entry-level talent, where there's a lot of functionality that they can do very, very well, but they still need guidance and they still need supervision and they still need checks to make sure that they're seeing the forest for the trees, that they're giving accurate responses, and that they are not mired in bias, which that is where the metaphor falls apart, because that's not what I'm saying about entry-level talent, but I am saying it about AI algorithms. And so I think that that's kind of a helpful metaphor to think about your AI being like your coworker, but one that needs some pretty direct supervision and support, but can really add on capacity. And so we are almost at the end of our time, which I hate because there's a lot of really great questions in here still. Thank you all. You've asked very thoughtful questions. So one of the questions is, some of the big players in AI, like OpenAI and Google, are prioritizing speed over ethics in the race to be the leader in AI. Do you think that big tech's emphasis on technology versus ethics will ultimately hamper progress? What role, if any, do you think that government should play in ensuring that sufficient safeguards are in place?
I think so. Starting from the last question, I think government have a role in regulation, right? But again, I think even governments need to sort of be judicious in those policies that don't in enacting policies to make sure they don't stifle innovation. Sorry, can you repeat the first part?
Yes. They said that some of the big players like OpenAI and Google, they're prioritizing speed over ethics because they're trying to become the leader in AI. So what do you think that big tech's emphasis on technology versus ethics will ultimately hamper progress?
The answer is yes, simply because I think, in my opinion, my humble opinion, I think that I think that ethics is important, right? Because when we build stuff, the technologies we are deploying nowadays, they're being deployed in high stakes decision making situations. And I think that rushing to release something into the world without considering its broader implication, I think it's going to hamper us as a civilization, right? Because I think that the implications of what we create is beyond, especially nowadays, is beyond operational efficiency or anything that just affects us. It affects a broader population, and I think that if guardrails are not put in place to check these large companies, right, from prioritizing profit over ethics, then that's where the government comes into play. And that's why I feel, to a large extent, government should be involved in playing a role in the guardrails that prevent people in the guardrails that prevent taking advantage of people, right? And that doesn't consider the ethical implications of their actions. But thank you. That's a very good question, but also one that, this conversation can do justice to.
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. And I do want to add into chat, here is a link for the blueprint for the AI Bill of Rights, which was co-authored by a Brown professor, Dr. Suresh Venkata-Subramanian, who just finished a stint at the White House under President Joe Biden. And he was one of the co-authors of this. It is not yet passed into law, but this is some guidance around what he thinks that the government ought to do in terms of safeguarding us and our privacy and our data around in the face of AI. So I think that this will start to answer some of your question around what should be done, because I think he's done a really good job answering that question. So we are at 5 o'clock on the dot, which I cannot believe. This hour absolutely flew by. So thank you so much, Taiwo, for your time and your guidance. And thank you everyone who asked incredible questions and who participated in shaping the future of our programs. While this short course on AI for leaders does not yet exist, though we hope it will soon, we do have a couple other programs I'd like to draw your attention to. So I'm putting into the chat 2 links. The first is for a program called Innovate to Elevate. It is a very short program. It is just 4 weeks. It's starting next week. So if you'd like to join us, please sign up right now. And it is on how to learn innovation skills. And there is a module on ChatGPT in that one. So I think it's one that you might like. It is a fully synchronous course. And so you just meet for 4 Wednesdays at 5 p.m. And that's it. And there's just a little bit of reading to do in between. And I think that that's a course that you may really enjoy, and we'd love to have you be a part of it. And the other one I'm putting in here is our Digital Health Innovation Certificate, which I mentioned earlier. It's a 6-month program. It specifically focuses on building a plan for an innovation that you'd like to launch in the healthcare field. And that could be from the medical perspective. So you could be a doctor or a nurse or healthcare professional, or it could be from the product side. So you could be an engineer or in pharma or something, or it's in STEM in some way. So we would love for you to join us for one of those programs. And we also hope to have an AI for Leaders program that you can join with us as well in the not too distant future. And we will let you know if and when that gets launched. Thank you all so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Yeah.